don't reckon I'd like it either.
Alright, so what we're gonna do tonight, we're on page, we'll be on page 34. We'll start with 3.3.2 main service calculations. But before we do that, I want to get out our homework sheet. We're going to go over that. I'm just going to ask y'all to read, kind of go back and forth and read one each. If you don't have the answer, that's fine. We'll help you. I'll help you find it. I have them. So, I did my homework. Okay. All right, so number one, Nate, start us off there.
All loads that are continuous duty are multiplied by 125% to determine the overcurrent protection device and conductor size.
You get that same thing, Cameron? Okay. Number two.
NEC selection 220.43B covered track lighting.
Yep. You agree?
Yes, sir.
Number three.
Outside lighting loads are calculated by multiplying the rating and the VA by the number of fixtures.
Number of fixtures. Okay. Number four, Cameron.
When calculating a load for receptacle in an office building, you must use 180 VA per receptacle.
And what does VA stand for?
Watts.
Watts or volt amps, right? Volts times amps. Number five.
When the number of general purpose receptacles is unknown, use 1 volt amp per square foot for office buildings.
1 volt amp per square foot. So if you had 100,000, it'd be 100,000 volt amps. Got that, Cameron? 1 VA per square foot. You get that? Like this. 1 VA per square foot, or per, if you want to write it out.
Is that number 5?
That's number 5.
Okay.
1 volt amp per square foot. If you had a 5,000 square foot, it'd be 5,000. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Number 6.
The combined load of 3 or more cooking appliances and other equipment for a commercial kitchen may be reduced in accordance with NEC demand factors.
Yep. Number 7.
220 Part 5 provides a separate method for computing farm loads other than the dwelling.
Yep. Number 8.
2 or more motors may be connected to the same feeder circuit instead of rotating the individual circuit to each motor.
Yep, motor. Motors are motor. Number 9.
Farm load calculations. 2 buildings, the second building next to the largest, is allowed to have a demand factor of 75%.
75%. Yep. Number 10.
NEC selection 240.4C requires that the conductors have an ampacity that is not less than the rating of the overcurrent device when the device is rated more than 800 amps.
Okay. Now let's stop there just a second. We'll pick it up in a second. So let's talk about one of the things I want to talk about tonight. I'm trying to incorporate a little bit of safety. And as you can see tonight, what we're looking at is like restaurants. Let's look what we're looking at. We're looking at restaurants. We're looking at hotels and motels, schools, and that's really the 3 things we're looking at tonight, okay, as far as load calculations. So let's talk about job-specific safety. So let's say for a restaurant, what would your safety possibly be? What would you be in a restaurant?
Talking new construction or service?
Yeah, new construction. Anything out of the ordinary for a restaurant?
Well, you probably have a whole lot more gas lines, so particularly towards the end of the job, you gotta be careful about
Gas
that.
lines, you gotta be careful around. I agree with that, because most of the time in the kitchen, you probably would. You probably have a hood system with you, that you're wiring that would require some fire alarm.
Yeah.
What else? Anything else? Other than just general PPE? Right, we're gonna wear that. I'd have a little bit of underground. You'd have to be careful trenching. A little bit of underground, probably, maybe in the kitchen. What else, anything else?
Depends on the height of the ceiling. You might
Yeah,
have lifts.
probably not. Got typical restaurant. How about in a hotel or motel? What could we run into that might be different as far as safety? How about multi-story?
Yeah, tie off.
Need to be tying off, probably working on some type of lift, particularly on the outside of the building, wouldn't you? You'd be tying off on that. Anything else?
Maybe a
Again,
crane, if it's tied.
Crane, yeah. Again, multi-story, you'd probably be working possibly on a story that the only thing you've got is rope protection of some sort around the edge, right? You'd have to be careful of that, protection around the edges of multi-story. Okay. Anything else? Hotel, motel? Can't think of nothing else, you know? How about on a school? What you gonna run into? Anything? You're probably gonna have, not safety, but you're gonna have a lot of special systems, aren't you? That you're gonna have to keep straight. Intercom, fire alarm, all that kind of good stuff, probably cameras now. Door access systems, probably. Use not out of those.
Lots of data.
Yeah, a lot of data. So a lot of work in concrete, in the block walls. There's some safety concerns there, I think, with block walls. Particularly now, what's the big thing as far as,
Oh,
how about somebody cutting a block around you? What you gotta do?
With a respirator.
And not just a regular dust, is it? It'd probably be more than that, wouldn't it? Because there are, what can breathing that dust cause?
Silicosis.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, so, that used to be something I wasn't even thought about, probably 5 years ago. So, and a lot of, actually, you may notice a lot of, things have gone to, like if you're drilling a hole in a wall, you're an electrician drilling a hole in the wall, you may have to have a special vacuum hooked up to that. Y'all run into that yet?
Yeah, we have to use, well, we have the Hilti one with the vacuum on it.
With the vacuum on it?
Most of the time it works all right, but then there's, especially with the bigger bits, or if you're trying to do drop-ins, sometimes, you know, trying to get it to only go in so far is a little tricky. But
Now, I think they make some hollow bits now that actually, so,
yeah, we have one where you can actually drill it out. It only has like a little stubby thing on it, but then you can slide I guess a little, a smooth bit on the end of the, on the drill bit, and just run that in there, and then I'll actually set the, it's like a setter for the
Yeah.
drop in. But that's a little difficult to get around get around the vacuum, because it just has an extra rubber piece that just makes it hard.
does the vacuum work well?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Do you have to wear a mask when you don't even have to wear a mask if you're using the vacuum?
Not at all. It has a, what is it, HPE or something like that, whatever, HEPA, HEPA, filter on it.
Filter on
And you can be drilling right above your head. Now, if a big chunk comes loose, that might fall through, but all the little dust and stuff just gets
Yeah.
sucked right up.
it? And so the big thing then you're saying is filter, right filter.
Right filter, and then you gotta make sure you clean it out, because if it starts leaking dust.
Yeah. How often do you have to clean it out? Once a day?
Once a day, maybe, at the end of the day, you shake it out.
Just shake it out? Gotta wear your mask when you're shaking it out, right?
Yeah, or get it wet.
Or do something, yeah, okay. Anything else for school, do you think? I mean, it would be like a lot of block walls, so you're gonna run into that, aren't you? And that's kind of something new. So safety, you know, that's the thing, you know, be aware of your individual job, because it'll vary, you know. You're not gonna have the same thing from a school to a restaurant to a hotel or motel. You're gonna have different equipment, you're gonna have different people on the job. I say you're gonna have gas on a restaurant, you're gonna have concrete on a motel, and concrete maybe on a motel. In a school, you're gonna have lifts on it, you're gonna have probably higher floor you're dealing with as far as motels. So every job, you know, has its own challenges, and you need to be aware of those safety concerns around you. The biggest thing is just putting your head on a swivel, being smart, not using common sense. Not doing something that What I think of probably the biggest safety thing I think on jobs is using the wrong tool for the purpose you're trying to do it with. You know, you get up in there and all of a sudden you're trying to drill something, you got this drill beside your head and, you know, it gets hung up, you know, and you're on the ladder and you probably run too high, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're laying on the floor. So there's ways of doing things properly and with the right tool, aren't there? Okay, so, all right, so that's safety for the night. Okay. Let's pick back up number 11. Who was next? Nate, I think you were.
The wiring systems for marinas and boatyards are designed using the same NEC rules as the other commercial occupancies, except for the application of several special rules dealing primarily with the design of circuits supplying power to boats.
Okay. And that's something I don't think we'll get to tonight. We'll study that next week. Number 12.
The smallest size locking grounding type receptacle that may be used to advise shore power boats at 30 amps.
30 amps. Okay. 13.
When performing the calculations for the main service, assume that all three-phase loads are balanced and may be computed in terms of voltamps or in terms of amperes.
Yep. Balanced. It's important, isn't it? Because what's going to carry the unbalanced load?
Neutral.
The neutral. Okay. 14.
I don't have that one.
Well, go ahead and read it.
Be sure when calculating three-phase services to use a multiplier of blank for the applied voltage. Is that 30%?
Square root of 3,
Yeah.
which is 1.732.
I had trouble finding that one too.
Did you?
I knew we had, I couldn't find the exact text.
Yeah, I don't think you found it in here anywhere. Matter of fact, I got it from like page 34,
Oh, okay.
just under a calculation, square root of 3. It's not really written in here anywhere. It's just a rule that I knew that you needed to know, and
Cool.
anytime you know three-phase, you got to do square root of 3. So, just something important to remember. 15.
In general, all loads for commercial occupancy should be considered continuous unless specified specific information is available to the contrary.
Yeah, so get that. Commercial occupancies, continuous, unless you're given other information, which is going to make a difference in your calculations, isn't it? And the reason, so like a store or something like that, we're assuming they're going to be open, you know, and they're going to keep your stuff on. 16.
One section of the commercial continuous load will be a blank that occur in infrequent valves.
Any idea?
I found warehouse.
Yeah, storage warehouse. Storage warehouse. Because what? Is anything going to be, you know, continuous there? Probably not. In fact, you're probably going to put lights on that's an occupancy sensor, aren't you? When you walk in, they're going to come on. When you leave, 15 minutes later, they're going to go off. Especially in the storage warehouse. 17.
Track lighting loads are calculated by allowing 150 volt amps for every 2 feet of track.
Yep.
Or a fraction thereof.
Track lighting, number 17. 18.
Window loads feeders should be calculated at 200 VA per linear foot of show window.
And you said show windows for the first two blanks?
No, I said window loads.
Yeah, window loads, okay. Window loads or show windows, I agree with you. All right, and then show window, okay? 200 volt amps per linear foot. 19.
NEC 600.5A requires that occupancies with a ground floor entry accessible to pedestrians have a sign outlet installed of each tenant space in accessible location.
Okay, all right. And number 20.
Minimal VA for an interior sign or outline lighting must be computed at 1200 volt VA.
1200 volt amp, very good. All right. So that completes our homework for section 3. Just kind of give you an idea, this is session 6. We'll go over session 6 tonight. Our plan is to get through. We've done our homework, our plan is to get through, actually just a couple of pages here is all we're doing. And then I'm gonna try to get to review the test, hopefully, give you some insight on that tonight. Next week, we're actually do section 7, which will take us to the end of the chapter, okay? And so you're reading from, just kind of go ahead and tell you, you're reading from there to the end of the chapter. I would like for you to do for homework next week, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, on page 40, I'd like for you to go ahead and do those review questions. There's 9 of those. And be looking over the review questions, which is on page 41 and 42. I definitely want you to do the ones in green, those 9, before next week. Okay. And review questions, which would be 1 through 20, we'll do those next week in class together. But if you want to just look over them, you don't have to do them for homework. The only ones you got to do for homework is 1 through 9 in the green. Okay. And so that'll be your homework for next week. We'll do review questions next week in addition to finishing up, and then we'll have our test the next week, and then start probably the next section. Okay. So there's some calculations you'll have to do. Of course, the tester's calculations you got to do. So let's look at page 34, 35, and 36 is where we're going. 36 and most of 37. So again, what we're looking at tonight is we're looking at, actually we're starting on page 35, but we did through 34. Loads for restaurants. Have you worked on a restaurant? Okay, you? No? Okay. All right, so the biggest thing is cooking, right? I mean, in a restaurant, it just makes sense. A lot of it is gas, but there's some rules. Let's look here at, I think the first rule we saw in one of our questions that we had is the first sentence. The combined load of 3 or more cooking appliances and other equipment for commercial kitchen may be reduced with NEC, and we said that was what? Yeah, for 3 can be reduced, so we'll just have to see what that'll be here in a minute and see what that provision is. This provision would apply to by restaurants, bakeries, similar locations. For example, a small restaurant is supplied with a 120/208 4-wire and 3-phase service. The restaurant has to fall in load, so let's look, right? It has 1,000 square foot area lighted by 120 volt lamps, 10 duplex receptacles, 20 amp 3-phase motor compressor, a 5 horsepower 3-phase roof ventilation fan, running continuously, I think that's important. More than 6 units of kitchen equipment with a total connected load of 80 kVA. All units are 208 3-phase, and then 2 sine circuits. All right. So let's look. Matter of fact, it says, if you look, figure 10, which is that figure 10 on the next page here? Yeah. So we're going to kind of look, we'll kind of flip back and forth to figure 10. All right. The domain service uses type THHN copper conductors calculated as shown in figure 10. Lighting and receptacle loads contribute 35.8 amps to A or C. Let's take a look at what we got there. Okay. So lighting, we've got, now how do we get 1.25?
It's probably off that table there.
Yeah, but why are we doing 1.25 though? 1.25 represents what, always? Let's look on our figure 10, we see lighting, A, you see our,
Continuous?
yeah, continuous. Our 2VA is actually from our table,
Right.
okay? And then we got 1.25, because don't y'all agree, the restaurant lighting is gonna be continuous? And so we see here that it's 1.25, okay, times 2VA, times 1,000 square foot is divided by 120 volts is what? It says it's 20.8 amps, okay? All right, so, and the way they want us to do it, it says here either phase A or C would be we can see here, we got ARC is 20.8 amps. Y'all see that there on figure 10? Okay. The receptacles, it says how many of them are there. And notice what they did. They put the load on the neutral too. You see what they did there? They put the same load. Okay. That would be, because that's worst case. That's worst case. Worst case, you can take that whole load and you can put it on a neutral. Worst case, for a phase. Alright, so the receptacles, we said there were how many?
10.
How many V8 is a receptacle?
180.
Yeah. We got 180, they're 120 volts, right? So we see there that they did it in a book, so it's 15 amps. Okay. Alright, so that's A. That takes care of the 120 volts. I'm going back and reading here on page 35, so the 80 kVA kitchen equipment load is subject to an application of 65%, and we get that from table 22056. Let's look and confirm that. Let's look at that together. 22056, there's a table. Page 71. Here we got 2014, it's page 71. And you see there's a table, 22056, and it says 6 and over, what is their demand factor?
65%.
65%. Page 71 on the bottom of your book. Okay. See the table, 22056?
Yes.
Okay. 6 and over, 65%. That's where we get that from. So now we look at what we've done. Let's look at B. Turn over to figure 10. Okay. So they've taken, they said 80 kVA. So they've taken, and that, we turn that into watts, right? Is that what they've done? Y'all agree with that? 80 kVA is what?
80,000 watts.
80,000 watts. Okay. And it says that what they've done there is the multiplier is times 0.65. Let's do that on our calculator and see what that comes to. How much?
52,000.
52 or 62? I don't know, I'm asking you. I just can't hear you.
50.
I got 52 too, as well.
All right, and we're going to divide that by 208 times 1.732, which is 360. And why are we dividing it times 360 instead of 208?
Because we got 3 phases.
Oh, it's 3 phase. And that ends up how much?
144.
Okay. And we see that's what they've done in their book. Now look, here's the thing I want you to see here too. A and C are 144 each, and B, but notice what neutral is. Why is neutral 0?
There's no neutral.
Because there is no neutral, right? There is no neutral. Okay, so that's B. Now it says there's a 20 amp 3-phase motor compressor, dual element fuse rating. Let's look at table 43052. And it says it's dual element. So we see here that's the second column, right? And we see the dual element for just a polyphase motor, which is the second one down, because it's a 3-phase motor, is what percentage?
175.
175. So that's where they get that. So it says it's a 20 amp, so 1.75 times 20 is 35 amps. That's just the fuse size. But our load as far as line A and C is what? Is it 35 or is it 20? It's to 20, isn't it? What, as shown. A neutral? No, no neutral. Okay. All right, it says there is a three-phase, 5 horsepower fan. Okay. We go to 432.50. 432.50. We got to find our table here. We got to find out how many amps of 5 horsepower. 5 horsepower, 208 is how many amps on 432.50.
Tim, 16.7.
16.7, as you can see there in our book on figure 10, that's what we got, is 16.7, no neutral. Okay. All right, the next thing, we have to take 25% of the largest motor. And that would be the 20 amp motor, because we had two motors. We had a 20 amp, we had a 16.7. So we're taking 25% of the 20 amp motor, and so 20 amps times 0.25 is what? It's 5, isn't it? As you can see there, note E, we've added 5 amps to our load. Okay. Now, how many sine circuits are there? 2. How much is a sine circuit? Minimum has to be what? 1200. All right. So we got to get this to amps though to get it, be able to get it in our sample. So this is volt amps, right?
Yes.
So to get to amps, what are we going to do?
Divided by volts.
Divided by volts, which is 120, and that's 10 amps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have 20 amps. Y'all agree with me there? Are we done? No.
Continues.
Because what's going to happen with that sign?
It'll be burning all day.
It's going to burn all day. So that's what? 25? 25 total amps. And you can see there, that's a 120 volt circuit. So what do we have? We got a neutral, don't we? So you can see there what they've done. Okay? And so when we add it up then, we see here 246.8 amps is what they come up with for A and C, just by adding them up. And the reason, the difference between that and B is because originally it just showed it didn't have any lining load on B or receptacle. Okay? They were either all A or C. And 186 amps for the line B, and the neutral is 60.8 amps. Okay? And so, then let's go back and read just a little bit. Let's go back into our page 35. Okay? And we see that the load of the three-phase motors, blah, 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 brings the total service amps to 246 amps for A and C and 186 for B. If the phase conductors are 250, the ground, let's look. Let's go to 310, 15B, 16. See if that's going to work. 310, we know we're using copper wire. We're going to use the 75-degree column, and we're going to see if 250 is actually large enough. 310, 15B, 16. Page 161.
Alright.
75-degree column. Number 250, how much is it good for?
255.
Yeah, so it's good enough because we had a 246 amps on the largest one. I did ask something about the grounding electrode. Let's figure out what the ground. Let's see if it says number 2. Where is grounding? What is article is grounding? 250, right? 250. And there's actually a table that tells us about grounding electrodes. Let's see if we can find that. See if you can find the table in Article 250 that asks us about grounding electrodes.
Grounding conductor at 250-102 C.
Not grounding conductors, try to find another table. We're looking for the grounding electrode,
250-66.
5066. And that's based on wire size. Yeah, 121. And so we base that on wire size. Our wire is what, 250? And so therefore, what size copper do we use?
Number 2.
Number what?
Number 2.
Number 2? Good. And that would be, if you notice in the book, that would also be the same size that we could use for the neutral, because we only had a load of like 60. And we don't want the neutral to be any smaller than the ground, right? So it says here that we would use that, okay? The fuses, and if you read on, I'm reading on page 35, the fuses selected in the Port of NEC rules for motor feeder protection. The ungrounded conductors therefore are protected at 300 amps each, because if we go to, let's go to 240.6A. And our wire was good for how much? 310 with the 255. And so if we look at standard size circuit breakers and fuses, what's the first one above 255?
300.
300. So that's the size fuse that we would use. Okay, make sense? Let's see, let's turn back over. Yeah, I'm just kind of, number one, if you look there on figure 10, conductors are 250, 75 degrees. Why do we use 75 degrees? Column. Over 100 amps. Use number 2 copper conductor for the neutral based on the size of the grounding electrode, which we went back and sized that. The overcurrent protection, if we see here, it actually ends up, they did a little bit differently, which they did. We should probably added that in, we'd come up with the same answer. We'd come up with 300 amps because we had 255. But if you see there what they did on number 2, they actually took also 125% of the largest motor. The grounding electrode conductor required would be a number 2. Okay, so that takes care of. But if you look in your book, and let's go ahead and turn to our code 220/88. That was a standard way. (220/88) is actually another way. There's a table. If you look there, optional, see table 220/88 down at the bottom? Permitted load calculation for service and feeder conductors for new restaurants. And so you can see here that they really just break it down into 2 categories. All electric, okay? And they start at, like, look at 0 to 200 kVA is 80%. If you go over from 201 325, you get 10% of the amount over 200 plus 160. Okay. So if you had like 300, it would be what? 30 plus 160. And then you see as you get larger and larger, your percentages go up a little bit. Okay. And you get one, not all electric. Got some gas. Now, most people, that's probably what you probably run into most of the time. You can see there from 0 to 200, it's 100%. So that's an optional way. And that note is found on page 35. And you can see there, we're kind of reading on page 35, 22088, add all electrical loads, including heating and cooling loads to compute the total connected load. And including the heating and the cooling load. It didn't say the largest, the way I'm reading it. Then select the single demand factor from the column that applies to total computed load. Again, it says that again, total computed load. And multiply the load by that factor, obtain the total demand using the sizing primary feeder or service sensor conductor. So just another way of doing it without having to go through all the steps that we just went through. So that's restaurants. That's loads for a restaurant. Got that? Let's look at loads for hotels and motels. I'm going to take a little 5-minute break. Portion of the feeder or service load contributed to general lighting in hotel and motels. Let's look at, let's go to 22042. And we see that motels and hotels, we see there's a lighting load demand factor, isn't there? And we see that the first 20,000 or less is 50%, from 20,001 to 100,000 is 40%, and the remainder is 30%. Y'all see that there? Page 70. Table 22042. Table 22042, right there at the top. And they got one that's listed hotels and motels. Okay. I'm kind of reading in the book now. And we also see that on, we turn over, or turn back, to page 68, general lighting loads for a hotel and motel, the lighting load is how many VA per square foot on a hotel and motel. Table 220.12. 2. See it, Cameron? I think you're on the wrong page. Go backwards. 220.12.
1, 2.
Yeah.
For hotels and motels?
Yeah.
Per square foot?
Yeah.
2.
2. Okay. All right. Hold on just a minute. All right, so in addition, the receptacle loads in the guest room is included in the general lighting, load of 2 VA per square foot. However, the demand factor does not apply to any area where the entire lighting is likely to be used at one time, such as the dining room or the ballroom. So let's look at the sample they give us there. Let's determine the 120/240 volt. So 120/240 we know is automatically what? Single phase, right? Feeder load contributed by general lighting in a 100-unit motel. The guest room is 240 square foot. All right, so we got to go, what are we going to do that? 240 square foot?
Times 100.
Yeah, 240 times 100 gives us what?
240,000.
Is that right?
24,000.
Is that right? 24,000? Okay. And then we have to multiply that times what?
2.
2. Why are we multiplying it times 2? So this is 2 volt amps per square foot, right? So 48,000. Okay. And that's what it shows here. Okay. Now let's go to our table, which is on page 70. On page 70, our table, 220.42. And it tells us that the first 20% is how much?
50%.
50%. So that's 10,000. All right. I'm going to kind of write that off to the side. Now I got to take 20 from 48, don't I? And I'm gonna get 28,000, and what is my multiplier on that?
40.
40%? And how much is that equal to? Y'all tell me how much that is. 28,000 times 0.4.
11,200.
Yeah, you could read the book, but you could do it. I know what you just did. Okay. So 11,200. And what we're gonna do with that 11,200?
Take that off.
Now we're gonna add it. We're gonna add it back to this 10,000. So now it's 22,200. Y'all agree? 21,000. 21,200. Now what are we gonna do with that 21,200? If we really wanted to know the amps, what would we do?
Divided by 240.
Yeah. How much is that?
$88 amps.
88 amps. Not a whole lot, is it? For a 100-unit motel, is it? But, I mean, what you got in there? Couple of lamps?
Microwave.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's hotel and motel loads, as far as that's concerned. So not really complicated on that. There's really not a load in a lot of load. The biggest load is gonna be probably in your HVAC units in each one of the rooms. As far as lighting, you can see, only 88 amps, not much. Okay. All right, let's take about a 5-minute break. We'll stop right there. Okay. And we'll get into optional calculations for schools. Okay. 5-minute break. You got school this week?
Yeah, got it every week. And then,
How much you got left?
probably about 3 years from December. I'll be there. I'll be stuck there for a while. And that's just classwork, and then they got that dissertation thing. I gotta write a book by the time I'm done, so that'll be fun. And it's gonna be so technical and boring, ain't nobody's gonna read it, but me and my professors, or I think there's 3 professors that have to read it, and then they have to critique it, and I have to defend it before them and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be cool.
Like, what are you taking right now?
Finishing up my master's.
I mean, what class?
There's one kind of on it's the history around the Bible, not just, history as it goes through the Bible, but, kind of what's going on before Jesus. It's called biblical backgrounds. So, like, what happened between the Old Testament and New Testament, different stuff like that, like the Apocrypha. I don't know if you heard about that, which a bunch of writings between the Old Testament and New Testament.
Yeah.
Different things. So that's been kind of cool, just reading, seeing how, Jesus just, there's a whole context to everything, and some of the things that he says against, like, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, there's a whole history behind that.
Right.
And stuff like that. So that's been kind of cool. And then another one is it's called Biblical Theology, or History and Nature of Biblical Theology, which is, systematic theology. You have your big categories, like theology proper, and like Christology, soteriology, and all these big categories. But that you're starting with the categories and then go in the Bible, see what it says. But with biblical theology, you start with the Bible and you work through, like the book of Micah, and well, what is God trying to say through Micah to us? You know, what are the specific themes that He wants us to know, you know, through Micah? And so you kind of look at it that way. So I mean, yeah, you get a lot of the same information, but it's just kind of it's a different approach you can take to it.
Yeah. Cool.
So it's been kind of fun. And then another one, just it's called hermeneutics, but how to actually read and then interpret the Bible, and not end up in some kind of wacko heresy or something.
I got you.
Like that. It's been good.
You like it?
I like it.
How many hours is that a week?
9 hours of class time, and then
Hey, bud. Hey. Okay. All right. You cool with that? Okay. And I should be there around that time, or maybe, I'm gonna wait, you know, I'm gonna go home and get my boat. So I won't be in a bigger rush now that I know that you're going first. So, you know, you get it all secure and kind of know where you're going. I'm not gonna put in the T-Roys. I never have. I'm gonna go on down. I'm actually gonna go on down, probably not the Moon, but even the next one down, which is a place that I'm familiar with. I forget the name of it. Lighthouse or something like that. I've never put in the T-Roys. I wouldn't have put in there just because I know not to. So, it is. It's very shallow in the back of that thing. So, yeah, we'll go on down. It's not just a few miles down the road, a couple miles down the road to get to the next landing. So we'll go down there. I've never put in the Moon, so we'll go down there with somebody. Any other info that she tell you? No. Right.
check out this one. Some guy found this ago. Remodel out of condo.
Yeah, good. And it hadn't been, you know, it hadn't, you know, it had dropped a little bit from the first when we got it down there. It's kind of stayed that same
Where we gotta use, huh?
place for the last.
I guess so.
It hadn't dropped.
Right out of 12.2.
So that's good. It dropped about a foot and stayed there for 3 weeks. And of course, it may come back up a little bit, but it's rain. It's a bit of rain. Yeah. So, I bet the upper end's gonna get some mud, at least for a little while anyway, that's for sure. Yeah, I think it will. It'll clear out.
Here's a good one.
I'm good deal. I'll just, I'll answer tomorrow, but I was planning on meeting you down there.
Glove on the, or leather glove on
Like I
the.
say, I'm gonna go to a meeting, and I got a meeting on the home,
Son of a gun.
packing stuff, and head on down. So, ever how long that meeting takes.
This page here on this
All right.
on Facebook.
All right, man. Good deal.
Stuff.
All right, bye.
Or a fella using plumbing tees, wire answers.
All right, we ready? All righty, so section 3.6.0, 22086 is where we're going to go to. And it's talking about schools and an optional method of doing schools. So I'm reading my book here, 35. 22086 provides an optional method to determine the feeder of a school equipment with electric, space heating, air conditioning, or both. And we're going to find that nowadays. Okay. Optional method applies to the building load, not the feeders within the building. So optional method is just for what then? There's what?
This is service drill.
Just their service interest wires. Okay. The optional method for schools basically involves determining the total connected load in volt amps. So we're going to get to volt amps. Converting the load to volt amps per square foot meter, and applying the demand factors from table 22086. And we can see there's a table, 22086, you see there on page 75? Optional method demand factors for feeders and service for schools. So the first 33 volt amps, connected load 3 volt amps per square foot is 100%. Over 33, the 220 volt amps, or 3 through 2 volt amps per square foot is 75%. The remainder, you can, so on and so forth. So let's try to work through this and see if we can understand what we're doing. So at school, it tells us the school has 200,000 square foot floor area, 480, 277 volt service. Let's look at our loads. So the interior lighting, okay, it said it's already given it to us. So our lighting is what?
600,000.
Yeah, because it's 3 volt amps per square foot. So that's our lighting. The next thing it gives us, it tells us there's 300 kVA, okay, of power load. Let's just write it down what we see here. 100 kVA of water heaters. All right, turning over. 100 kVA of cooking. $100 kVA of what?
Miscellaneous loads,
All right, what's my next one?
200 kVA air conditioning loads.
And then lastly,
300 kVA heating load.
okay. How much, 300? Okay. So we see here, the service load in volt amps is to be determined by the optional method, so we have to convert all these, don't we? To what?
To VA.
Yeah.
And we gotta drop the AC load,
You sure?
because it's smaller than the heating
Are
load.
you sure we are?
Well, the book says so.
Does it? Okay. All right. Okay. Just want to make sure. Well, let's get this total here first, okay? All right. And then we'll drop it. Let's add it all
Sure.
together. Let's see what we got. How much we got? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's 1.7 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Nate says, what we're going to do, we're going to drop the smallest of these, the AC or the heat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we're going to drop the 200, and it gives us 1.5 million. Is that what we got there? Okay. All right. Now, look at it. We had how many square foot?
200,000.
Yeah. So we got 1.5 million divided by 200,000 is equal, this is how many, we're gonna find how many volt amps per square foot that we actually are doing. Because that's what our actual table tells us to do. Okay? So, how much is this equal to? I know you can look in the book,
7.5.
volt amps per square foot, right? So let's look in our book here. It says the combined load is 1.5, that's what we got. That includes the 200 air conditioning, which we did. This, the heating is larger. Based on 200,000 square foot of all floor area, the load per square foot is 7.5. Now let's look. It says what? The demand factor for the portion of the load up to and including 3 VA per square foot is 100%. Okay? All right. So it would be how much? Look there down below. It's going to be 200,000, right? Okay. See that there below there, camera?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we got So it's 100%, it's 3 VA, now that's what the table says, it's 3 VA. So now the remainder is 4.5 then, isn't it? Because here's what we had, I wanna make sure you get this, but we had 7.5, right?
Yes.
We just took out, it says 100% would be at 3 VA. That leaves us with 4.5. And we look at our table, it says 3 through 20 VA is how much percent?
75.
75%, right? So we're gonna take, we look here what they've done, let's erase all this. All right, so we got, our square foot is 200,000 times what? 3 VA? That's 600,000. That's at 100%. Okay. And if you look there, what they did next, they did the 200,000 times what?
4.5 VA.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that math, and then we'll do the next part.
I got 900,000.
900,000. And then what we're gonna do with that 900,000? Multiply it times 75%, right? How much is that equal to?
$6,750,000.
600, 6 what?
$6,750,000.
I got 600,000 or 675,000.
675,000. Well, we're gonna do that 675,000. We're gonna add it to the 600, aren't we? That gives us 1,275,000. Y'all agree with that? Which is what we got in the book. Okay. It says the size of service sensor conductors, NEC 230, let's turn to 23042. 23042 and see what that, let's see what that says. It talks about continuous load. Okay. In a school, that's probably what we're going to have, aren't we? So what they've done is they've taken this whole thing and they've multiplied it times 1.25. And we see that we get there is what? 1,593,750 VA. Alright. Now what are we going to do? It said our service size was what? What was their service voltage?
480, 3-phase.
Yeah. 480 times what?
Square root of 3.
1.732. So let's do this and see what we'll come up with. How much?
$19.17.
All right, 1,917 ounce. Let's find out what size fuse we're going to use. Where we're going to go to find out what size fuse we use. To what? 240.6. You get that, Cameron? Okay, now we're gonna find out what size fuse we use by going to 240.6. What size?
That's it.
2,000? Now, one of the other things they just did, and I think this is a good practice, they looked at what wire size you would use. So let's go to 310/15B16. So we got to base our wire size. In fact, when we're going to run one wire for this 2,000 amp service, no. So they looked at it, 4 different options there on page 37. They said, okay, what if we run 4 wires? 4 wires, that means you got to have how many amps per wire?
500 amps.
500 amps per wire, which would be what size wire size?
$900.
900 MCM. Anybody ever put any 900 MCM in? Me neither. Option number 2 says it'd be 5 runs. That's 400 amps per leg. What size wire would that be?
$600.
600. Still pretty expensive, isn't it? Not something ordinary. Option number 3 says 6 runs. You divide 6 into 2,000, you get 333 amps. What size wire would we use for that?
400.
400. 400 something you buy every day? I can tell you no, it's not. It's not something you ever put any 400 in? No. Option number 4 says 7 runs. You divide that, that's 286 amps. What size wire is that?
350.
350. That's something you put in? Yeah, it's a common wire. But I'm probably going to go with option 4. I'm going to use 7 runs, 350. Okay. And if you look there, they actually discarded it. I like option number 4 because they should use option number 3 because we just don't buy 400 MCM that often. 350 is more common. So that's what they did, and we look here, and that's fine. So we'll look at what they did. The overhead service interest is therefore minimally sized 6 parallel 4 wire runs of 400 XHHW copper conductor, and it says XHHW2 is selected because it can be used either in wet or dry location, because you're probably going to do what with that wet wire? You're going to put it underground, aren't you? And so you want something that's wet, a location, a wire that's a wet location. Where would you find that at? Let's look at table 310-104A. 310-104A. Big table. Look on page 177. Page 177. You there? Look, find XHHW2. And look at application provisions. What does it say?
Dry and wet location.
Dry and wet location. Okay. Dry and wet location. That's what, you know, let's just find THHN. Let's find THHN, which is on the page before that. What is THHN good for?
Dry and damp.
Dry and damp. What's the difference?
Can't submerge.
You think that pipe gonna get what could get wet? That PVC pipe? Oh yeah. How many of you ever pulled out the wire and it be soaking wet? So HHW2 is the wire that we would use, right? And that's what it says. Select because we're going underground. And if you look here, it says this point, if the length of the run has been known, the voltage drop could be used by checking. But we're going to say, you know, it hadn't been exceeded. See if it exceeded 2%. So the next larger would be selected. Note that option 4 I'm reading here with 3 with 350 kc mil conductors could be installed to allow for future needs. So we could have done that, and it would have been a little bit overkill, wouldn't it? Also note that an alternate solution is to bring the higher line voltage to a smaller high voltage substation, blah, 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 and we'll do that. This is fairly common practice, especially in medium to large industrial establishments. But what we're doing here, I don't think we'd do that. So I think we could probably either go with either option 3 or 4 and then base things based on that. Grounding electrode for option number 4. What would our grounding electrode size be for option number 4? What would our grounding electrode be for option number 4?
Option number 4.
Yep.
Number 2.
Number what?
Number 2.
Yeah, number 2. All right. Let's take just a few minutes, and we'll give you some things to highlight. Okay? So get out something to highlight with or mark with, and we're going to review a little bit. So you can be studying this the next couple of weeks. Okay? All right, let's go to 2.2.1. Point 2.1. Know what the demand factor is for a neutral for like an electric range or a clothes dryer. The demand factor for a clothes dryer or electric range is a certain percentage. On page 19.
70%.
Mark that, yeah. 3.1.3. Which is page 29. I want you to be able to calculate the load on a show window. Like that one there's 55 foot. Okay? 55 foot times 200 VA, isn't it? Is blank VA. Know how to do that. Know that a show window is how many VA per foot? 200, right? Okay. So know how to do that? You can highlight that there. 1.1.1. Which starts on page 2. Know how many hours something has to run for it to be continuous.
3 hours straight.
Yeah, so highlight that. 1.4.3. Lighting loads. So if I give you, I told you that it was a house, and you would need to know how many VA per square foot. If I told you a 2,000 square foot dwelling, okay? How much, what would the VA be for the lighting?
6.
6,000, right? So know how to do that. Know how to do that. Understand how to do that. All right, 3.1.0. Commercial and industrial lighting loads. Noted if you had X amount of receptacles, like if I give you 50 receptacles, I'd want to know, if I said, okay, there's 50 outlets in this place, in this building, how many volt amps would you multiply per receptacle to get to the total volt amps? You had 50 receptacles, how many volt amps would you multiply per receptacle to get to the total volt amps? How many volt amps is a receptacle?
180
180. So if I told you 50, you'd do what?
times by 180.
Yeah, and that'd give you your volt amp. So know how to do that. Okay. 1.3.4. got a 100-foot tap rule. Know that the rule about the building, how many feet over, wall heights of how many, over what feet can you do the 100-foot tap rule?
35 foot.
35 foot, I know that. .4.0, loads for restaurants, is something that we just went over. Noted if I told you that you had 8 pieces of cooking equipment, what would the demand factor be? And you'd be able to use your code book to find these answers, by the way. You can use your code book in the test, okay? So just know that if I give you 8, and I said non-dwelling kitchen appliances, and you 8, you got to know which table to go to find the demand factor, right? And you go to table what? 22056, wouldn't you? So know to do that, which is on page 35. Know that to find the demand factors on kitchen equipment, you got to go to table 220.56 for non-dwelling units. You got it, Karen? Page 35, first column, right in the middle. Table 22056, just highlight that.
Oh,
It's in green.
oh, I see now.
Know where to go to do that. 3.2.0. Closed for retail stores. To know what your, if I give you like, if I told you that the lighting load was 20,000 on a store, and I said it was continuous, then what would actually the total load be? What would you have to do? You'd have to multiply it times what? If I told you something that was continuous load, what are you going to multiply it by?
125%.
125%. So know how to do that. If I told you something's 20,000 load on a store, you'd multiply it times 125%. So know how to do that. Okay? One point zero. Page 2. No. Know those bullet points. Just know those bullet points. Particularly the second bullet point. .00. Page 14. Know that if you're calculating any kind of building, the first thing you got to know, basically the first thing you got to know is what?
Occupancy type.
Huh?
Occupancy type.
Occupancy type, but once you know that, if you knew that, then what would be the most important thing to know?
Square foot.
Square foot, that general area or the square feet. That's what you need to know. That's the first thing you need to know. All right, 1.2.0. Know how to do a three-phase calculation. In other words, if I give you like if I told you something was 90,000 VA, right? And I told you it was 208 three-phase, what would you do to get the amps? Tell me.
Divided by 360?
Divide by what?
360?
Yeah, or, let's go ahead and write it out. 1.732 or 360. You get that, Cameron? You understand that? Okay, know how to do that. Know how to do that. If I give you a VA, know how to, and I told you the three-phase service now, whether it's 480 or 208, you're gonna do what? You're gonna multiply it times what?
1.7.
1.732, yes. Okay. All right, 1.4.0, demand factors. I want you to know which one, the optional method for schools is Article what?
NEC 220.86.
Yep, I highlight that, I know that. All right. Know how to read like tables, 430.247 and 430.250. So it'd be like 3.9, let's go to 3.9.0. Motor circuits. And you see there, motor circuits, one of the things we do is we have to go to to find the amps on a motor. Where'd you go find the amps on a three-phase motor? You go to 430.250. 430.247, I think, is a single-phase motor. But they're actually going to give you a table on a test. You've got to find the load based on the voltage and the horsepower. Okay? You understand how to do that? Cameron?
What page is that on?
It ain't on a certain page. I'm just telling you what you need to know. It's under 3.9.0. You just need to know what, you need to know that if you got a table like 430, 250, you need to know if it's a certain horsepower and a certain voltage, how you find the amps, right? Like a 10 horse, let me give you an example. You on 430, 250?
Yes.
10 horsepower, 480 volt, three-phase motor is how many amps? You ain't got it? Oh yeah, go to your code book. You told me you go on the table. You ain't there. 430, 250. You need some tabs.
250?
Yeah. That's three-phase, right? 10 horsepower, 480 volt motors, how many amps?
Horsepower.
10.
And
480 volt.
is it 14?
I don't know. You tell me. I'm not even looking.
That's what I got too.
Okay.
Yeah, 14.
Oh, don't ask me. I'm asking you. Okay. All right. So know how to do that. Know how to do that, okay? Also know that if you've got 3.9.0, if you've got multiple motors, you've got to take the largest one and do what with it? You got to take the largest one, like under 3.9.0, you take the motors and you take 25 on page 38, like the first paragraph, you take 25% of the largest motor. So you take 1.25, okay? If you got more than one. So know how to do that, okay? All right, 3.7.0 is shore circuits for marinas and boat yards, which we haven't got to yet. But know that, it's actually one of our blanks. Know that the smallest receptacle you can put is a what? How many amps?
30.
No, not 20.
30?
Yes. While we're right, let's see, now let's go way back to 1.3.0. Tap rules. Let's see. know the first sentence under 1.3.0. The heat must be trying to come on or something. Y'all hear that? All right, 3.3.1. Know how to use table 220.12. Know how to use table 220.12, which is found in the first sentence, but know how to use that table. Know how to use that table to find something, okay?
Table 220.42.
220.12, found there in the first sentence on 3.3.1, that table. Know how to be familiar with that table in your code book, okay? 3.6.0, optional calculations for schools. If I give you a certain VA of a school, I want you to be able to do the lighting load under this optional method, okay? And you'd have to use what table to do that? Table what?
220.86.
220.86, you'd have to be able to use that table. So be familiar with that table in your code book. Know how to use that table. We just did one. We just used that. Okay. All right. 3.5.0 for loads for hotels and motels. Know how to do one of those, like that example there. Know how to do that. Know how to do that example. Okay. It's not too hard. Know how to do that. 1.1.0. Page 2. 1.1.1, I'm sorry. 1.1.1. Know how to, if you got more than 3 current carrying conductors, know what table you would go to find how you would reduce that. In other words, you see there, raceway field, see the number there? There's the number of current carrying conductors. I'm reading the second paragraph. Each 3M passing conductors may be adjusted using 310.15B3A. Know how to use that table there. Right there in that paragraph I read there. The number of current carrying conductors in a conduit that exceeds 3 ampacity conductors must be adjusted using NEC table 310.15B3A. Know how to do that. Okay? Know how to do that as an example doing that. If I give you a wire size, I told you there was 6 of them in a pipe, you've got to know how to reduce it. Okay? 2.3.0. Calculation for multifamily. Know that second paragraph. Know the last sentence. .7.0. In marinas and boat yards, know how to, we hadn't done it yet, know how to do this example on page 38. We'll do one next week, but you'll need to know how to do that. Okay. All right. 3.8.0 farm load calculations. If I give you, and we'll do this next week too, if I give you like, there's 3 buildings, you got to be able to find the total load. And we'll do one of those examples next week, okay? And then lastly, under still 3.8.0 under farms, no, see the second paragraph under farm load calculations. Really the last sentence. And I'm good for tonight. We've done all we can do. See if we've accomplished all our tasks tonight. Loads for restaurants, loads for hotels, optional calculation for school. We discussed safety. We've read over, we got the questions in the back. We did that, reviewed questions. And that's it. Okay. Everybody understand what we're doing? Okay. Next week, in addition to what I told you, you need to read the rest of your chapter, right? Read the rest of the chapter from where we stopped to the end of the chapter before next week. And do what?
Agree.
Agree. Okay. All right. Good deal.